Hi, you're with Julian on the Browno and an album review of Ibibio Sound Machine's latest. These are a London collective who've done, this is their fourth studio album. Their self-titled debut came out in 2014, Uyai in 2017 and Doko Mien in 2019. So this one, Electricity, led by Afla Saki, vocalist is Eno Williams. Alpha Saki is a percussionist, drummer Joseph Amoako, Philip P.K. Ambrose on bass, and they're a large collective. I guess the first thing that popped into my head when I was sort of, I've not really heard of them before, was the outstanding London collective Sault. I've mentioned before on the radio show that they're possibly the most important band in the world right now, taking this very sort of multicultural ethnic mix, but here it sort of references Africa a lot more, whereas the Sault's music references London a lot more, and is sort of, rap and bass music as is at their core, and hip hop production as well, whereas this is a little bit more sort of international in flavour. Another act is Simonde, who I think are actually still going, but their first two albums in the early 1970s, a London collective that referenced psychedelic soul from America, Nigerian Afrobeat, funk, and just had their own spin on it. Those first two albums are essential for your collection. They are masterpieces. These guys, honestly, the first time I heard the album, it blew me away. In the second and third times, much less so. The opening track is absolutely a monster. Have I written down what the title is? I'm going to have to find out what it is. Oh, anyway, the first track on the album is magnificent. It throws up so many interesting allusions to other acts that are right in my pocket. First of all, I mentioned these are a much more sort of African-sounding band, but not for much of the album. Like the first band that came into my head was LCD Sound System, with this very sort of almost industrial driving live bass sound, and also ESG, the legendary three sisters from the Bronx, who made some astonishingly influential music around the turn of the 1980s, and who heavily influenced the LCD Sound System. But also what the LCD Sound Systems label, owned by the band leader James Murphy and Tim Goldsworthy, were doing with DFA Records and their sort of long disco edits that were very sort of post-punk, the whole Fisher Spooner electro clash sort of thing. Factory Floor, a wonderful UK industrial electronic act whose self-titled debut album is fantastic. I've not heard that they've done another so far. It's been a few years now. And surprisingly white sounding in that it's got that sort of, you expect this kind of music to be delivered by white folk at this stage on track one. It's an amazing track. Unfortunately, it overshadowed the rest of the album for me. After that, really pulverizing opening. The amount of power dropped, and it became a lot more sort of middle of the road. Electricity, the title track number 2, is probably the worst on the album, and it sort of highlights how sort of bland a lot of this music is. I really continually wish that they upped it to how abrasive and potent that opening track was, and it sort of sits in the pocket of sort of mid-90s. You know, that kind of soul that arrived in the mid-90s that was a little bit hip-hop and a little bit soul and a little bit R&B, but was actually quite bland. For a very modernist band, I'm surprised that much of the album sits in that pocket. The third track as well, really drifty. I thought that all that, the fifth track with Hot Chip, it suddenly exploded again. It's produced by Hot Chip, and we've seen people like Fortet produce acts and get great, manage to stamp themselves on the act without actually bringing more out of the act. Hot Chip here is they're magnificent. They actually bring out these really fat synths that just liven up the album. And 17, 18, 19 is something that the album is lacking, apart from probably 3 or 4 tracks, which is much more musically compelling. And it seems to be shouting about Frodo, but I think I'm wrong there. And another thing that was missing from the album, Oyo, is the first time I actually kind of felt Nigerian Afrobeat. Nigeria's got this incredible legacy of music going back to the late 60s, where they were making this unbelievably great psychedelic rock. There's a Nigeria 70, the compilation, is an essential one. It's just absolutely amazing psychedelic rock. And then you add the Fela Kuti Afrobeat on top of it. The music scene there was amazing. And that Oyo was the first time that I even really felt that on the album. And it could have done with a lot more of it. The other thing is there is a lack of songwriting on this album. I thought that the last track, Almost Fly, you can hear melody and progression and stuff like that, rather than just sort of elements stapled together. The weirdest comparison, but it actually felt a little bit like Fetch the Bolt Cutters for me, the Fiona Apple album, the most overrated album of the last decade, without any doubt at all. In that there are like 3 or 4 great tracks that are undeniable, and the rest of the album, at least 60% of it, sound like half-finished demos that don't have enough musical ideas to sustain even half their length. And that's what I felt here. Like, whenever they write a song on this album, and it's actually got some musical depth and some sort of melodic progression, and it's memorable from a melodic perspective, it actually shines out that the other tracks don't. And the more I listened to this, the more that was shown up. So it didn't pull me back very much. And virtually nothing is as good as that opening track. So this is a kind of music, because of its ethnic and cultural makeup, that journalists just can't deal with. They have to rave about it. It's got brilliant reviews. But for me, it was a surprisingly flat and bland, and I was shocked to say middle of the road listening experience. So worth it for a once through and to pick up on those great tracks. Certainly all that, the fifth track, whatever the opening's called, 17, 18, 19, Oh Yo Yo. And Almost Fly is actually quite a good ender. I love the very frenetic sort of percussion going on in the background over what is virtually a ballad. But it's a frankly weak album. So I'm going to give Ibibio Sound Machine. Is it Sound Machine or Sound System? I really can't be doing this. Why don't I just get stuff ready? Sound Machine. Ibibio Sound Machine's Electricity. A rather flat 6 out of 10.